Resuming debate, the honourable member, well, I always say my sister-in-law's favourite MP, the honourable member for Chatham-Kent-Leamington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's always an honour and a pleasure, I didn't hear that, to bring your sister-in-law and all the other constituents in Chatham-Kent-Leamington their voice to this chamber. Mr. Speaker, you have ruled that all House business must be suspended until the government hands over all documents related to the SDTC scandal to the RCMP. The Auditor General of Canada found that the Prime Minister had turned the Sustainable Development Technology Canada Corp into a slush fund for Liberal insiders. $400 million paid out to Liberal insiders, which totaled, it's an astounding number, Mr. Speaker, 186 cases of conflict of interest. You're going to hear me say this more than once. A question: where is the accountability? The Auditor General made it clear that the blame for this scandal falls on the industry minister who, quote, did not sufficiently monitor, end quote, the contracts given to Liberal insiders. In a July 2024 article in the National Post, the former chairperson of the scandal-plagued Clean Tech Fund was found to have, quotes, improperly furthered the interests of the companies she was associated with by failing to recuse herself from the board's funding decisions. This according to the Ethics Commissioner's latest report. Annette Verschuren resigned as the president of the board of directors of the SDTC, late last year, when it was announced that she was the subject of ethics investigations. Ethics Commissioner Conrad van Finkenstein found that Ms. Verschuren, quotes, failed to comply with some of the provisions of the Conflict of Interest Act. She resigned, but the industry minister did not follow suit with an announcement himself that he would not resign. So why is it appropriate for Ms. Van Schuren to resign, but inappropriate for the minister to do the same? We've heard the previous speaker, my colleague, reference ministerial accountability. Mr. Speaker, where is it? Brings back some memories of the sponsorship scandal. You may recall the year was 1996 when the Liberals founded the sponsorship program to promote federalism in Quebec. Two Auditor General reports found that the Liberals, under Jean Chrétien, had overseen the spending of $250 million through the sponsorship program between 1997 and 2001. $100 million of those funds were redirected to the Quebec wing of the Liberal Party. The scandal led Canadians to vote out the Liberals for the next decade in favour of Conservatives who could be trusted with the public purse strings. And now history is repeating itself. As George Santayana, the earliest 20th century writer and philosopher, has written, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. It seems that this government, Mr. Speaker, has forgotten the past. So let's fast forward to today, 2024. Here we are once again. Apparently the Liberals feel that it's still that they are, quotes, entitled to their entitlements, as the former cabinet minister David Dingwall infamously coined. The scandals are numerous and mounting. What is incredulous is that over the past 9 years, there has been no accountability from the top. Again, I reference ministerial accountability, or even higher. The Prime Minister has thrown those who did not succumb to his will under the bus. Let's think of the Honourable Judy Wilson-Raybould and the Honourable Dr. Jane Philpott. But he himself has not taken any responsibility for what is arguably the most scandal-plagued and corrupt government in recent Canadian political history. Mr. Speaker, I have a laundry list of Liberal scandals to validate my point. I've only got 20 minutes. Well, I'm going to take a crack to touch upon just a few of the conflicts of interest and corruption here. Again, I'm going to ask, where is the accountability? 2020, a firm in the riding of the Minister of Public Services and Procurement was paid $150 million for COVID-19 vaccines that were never delivered. Medico Inc. was that firm, and it received $173 million in research money for a total of $323 million in federal aid. Medico was to build a vaccine factory, but that never transpired. Once again, the Liberals shut down any investigation into why taxpayers paid such an amount and received nothing in return. Unfortunately, this is an all too common pattern for this government. Bill Morneau is another former minister who was scandal-prone. He began his political career by violating the Elections Act, for which he was fined. He participated in a series of, quotes, department-supported events in his official capacity as finance minister during the pre-election period for the 2019 election. This caused the expenses related to those events to benefit the Liberal Party of Canada. This is the same minister who forgot, quotes, to declare he had a villa in France. Now, I'm to address all questions through the Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, have you ever forgotten a house? He also sponsored Bill C-27, which just happened to increase the value of pensions sold by the minister's company, Morneau Shepell. When the bill was tabled in the House of Commons, the value of Morneau Shepell shares jumped. Coincidentally, the minister, Morneau, held $21 million worth of those shares. Conflict of interest, anyone? Again, I reiterate, where is the accountability? CBC reported that when former Minister David Lametti left cabinet, many people were wondering why. We've since learned that the former Attorney General cancelled a verdict of first-degree murder against Jacques Delisle, a former judge, even though all the legal experts were against this decision. Mr. Lametti and the government refused to answer why he'd done that, even though Delisle later pleaded guilty to manslaughter. I'm not done yet, Mr. Speaker. In fact, I'm just getting started. The disregard and breaches of ethics kept on coming. In December 2022, the Minister of Export Promotion and International Trade and Economic Development of Canada was found guilty by the Ethics Commissioner of giving contracts to her best friend. And who can forget, of course, the case of the other Randy. Last July, the Ethics Committee uncovered text messages that the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development, and Official Languages continued to direct his company while he was minister. In another sheer coincidence, his company received nearly $120 million in government grants and contracts. Again, conflicts of interest, anyone? Where is the accountability, Mr. Speaker? The minister testified that Randy, referenced in these texts, was not him, but another Randy who just happened to work at the company that he had a 50% ownership stake in. The following committee hearing, his business partner testified, really, there was only one Randy who ever worked at this company, and that was the minister. Friends and family of Liberal cabinet ministers have also inappropriately benefited from their ethical lapses. The Minister of Transport failed to report, as required under the Conflict of Interest Act, that her husband, John Knowlton, a director at Life Labs, was among several businesses awarded COVID testing contracts, this as confirmed by the Health Minister. Blacklock reported that Life Labs received COVID testing contracts worth $66,307,424 on June the 23rd, and a separate $1.9 million contract on August the 20th, when the Transport Minister was the Minister of Public Works. Another case of nothing to see here, folks. Conflict of interest, anyone? Where is the accountability? And who can forget Scott Bryson when he was president of the Treasury Board, trying to block the approval for a Navy supply ship that was being built at Davie Shipyard in favor of their powerful Irving Shipyard. He used to chair one of the investment firms as his spouse sat on the board of directors. He then worked with the government to have Vice Admiral Norman charged with a breach of trust before Vice Admiral Norman was exonerated on all charges in 2019. Is there no limit to the lengths that this government will go to enrich the lives of themselves and that of their friends? I would be negligent if I failed to mention Navdeep Bains. His name has come up in earlier interventions. Another former Liberal cabinet minister. As Minister of Science, Innovation and Industry, he pledged that the government would demand that the big three, Bell Canada, Rogers Communications Canada, and TELUS Communications, would lower their prices by 25% in the next 2 years for cell phone plans that offer between 2 and 6 gigabytes of data. In April 2023, former Minister Bains was appointed by Rogers to its executive leadership team. The hiring of Mr. Bains does raise concerns, and especially in the light of the government's approval of the Rogers-Shaw merger. Did anyone from government on the government side of the House dare to question the blatant conflict of interest here? Where is the accountability? Of course, no Liberal scandal chronicle would be complete without mentioning the SNC-Lavalin affair and the We Charity scandal. I've previously mentioned that how former ministers Raybould and Philpott were victims of this government's corrupt behavior. SNC-Lavalin was more than just breaching ethics laws or rules. The Prime Minister made a travesty of the separation of the power between his office and that of the Attorney General's office. The PM ignored the independence of the Attorney General to help his friends at SNC avoid criminal prosecution, and in doing so, orchestrated a campaign to pressure the Attorney General, Jody Wilson-Raybould, to overrule the independent public prosecution. Mr. Speaker, no one should be above the law, not even the Prime Minister. Another infamous scandal, of course, the We Charity. This time, it was the Prime Minister's family that benefited greatly. Margaret Trudeau was paid approximately $250,000 for speaking at 28 events, while the Prime Minister's brother, Alexandra, spoke at 8 events and received about $32,000. In testimony before MPs on July the 28th, Mark Kielburger said that Sophie Gregoire Trudeau also was reimbursed more than $200,000 in expenses for appearances at We Charity events, and the We Charity covered $41,000 in costs for Bill Morneau and his family in 2017 for trips to Ecuador and Kenya to review the organization's humanitarian work. And I would be remiss if I didn't touch upon the notorious Arrive scam and GC Strategies, the Liberal-friendly company that charged at least $60 million for the app, which was to have cost $80 grand. To add insult to injury, 76% of the contractors that worked on this did zero work on the app. Once again, the Canadian taxpayer footed the bill with zero accountability on behalf of the government. But wait, Mr. Speaker, I'm still not done. Unbelievably, there are more illicit Liberal practices to come. Let's talk about the Prime Minister's Christmas vacation at the ArriveCAN Island and the subsequent $50 million in federal funding the ArriveCAN Foundation has received since 2016 from this government. The vacation lasted until January the 4th, 2017, 8 days in total. It was later disclosed that the government expenditures for the trip had amounted to $215,000. The Prime Minister then adopted the position that he and the ArriveCAN were close friends, and the trip was more of a personal nature, even though they hadn't seen each other in 30 years. More of the quotes, entitled to my entitlements philosophy, I guess. The Prime Minister has a penchant for luxurious vacations. Now, most Canadians would agree that he isn't justified in taking a vacation. I certainly do. But I do not believe that they would agree that he should satisfy his champagne tastes on the taxpayer dime. Although it took some persistent digging through access to information, the PMO finally admitted that it was the Prime Minister and his wife that stayed in a $6,000 per night hotel suite while attending the funeral for our sovereign, Queen Elizabeth II. The stay at the Corinthia London Hotel became just another shameful display of a lack of respect for the average Canadian by billing them an astounding $400,000. The Prime Minister and his office were not forthcoming with these details. Witness what we're doing here today and for the past week. Again, an abhorrent lack of accountability, Mr. Speaker. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the disastrous trip to India by the Canada's First family. As the Economic Times reported at the time, quote, Trudeau's time in India was criticized for its lack of official business, not to mention...
A point of order from the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure you can anticipate. The member knows full well you're not supposed to be using members by their name.
Now the honourable member can retract and restart that. The honourable member for Chatham-Kent Leamington.
I do so retract. As the Economic Times reported at the time, quote, so-and-so's time in India was criticized for its lack of official business, not to mention the excessive photo ops and insensitive overuse of Indian clothing, end quote, which I adjusted. Canadians were once again on the hook for what appeared to be more of a lavish family vacation than a diplomatic bilateral meeting. The fiasco included having his own celebrity chef flown in from Vancouver. But all of this pales in comparison to the PM inviting convicted terrorist Jaspal Atwal to dinner. Mr. Atwal was convicted of attempted murder in Canada in 1987 after he tried to assassinate a visiting Punjabi cabinet minister. It turned out that Atwal was a long-time Liberal supporter, an activist, a former donor to the party, and a former Liberal board member for the electoral district of Surrey, British Columbia. There has not been accountability for the India fiasco. I don't know why that has a hard time coming off my tongue. And Canada was left red-faced with embarrassment and another $1.66 million in debt. Mr. Speaker, there are simply too many Liberal breaches of ethics violations to name them all here today. I haven't touched upon the Julie Payette fiasco, nor the Minister of Defence's interference in the Nova Scotia shooting tragedy. You will recall that he pressured the then Police Commissioner Brenda Luckie to publicly release information about specific firearms used in the shooting in order to advance the federal government's gun control legislation. Following the resignation of the Ethics Commissioner, Mario Dion, and I believe he resigned due to overwork, the Liberal government decided to appoint Martin Richard, sister-in-law of the current Public Safety Minister, to replace him. Again, conflict of interest, anyone? Where is the accountability? This is why common sense conservatives have raised this point of privilege. This is why we are here today, yesterday, the day before, we'll be here tomorrow, and we'll be here all next week, if necessary. We call on, fair point, the week after. This is why we call on the government, the SDTC, and the Auditor General to hand over all documents, unredacted, related to Justin Trudeau's Green Slush Fund to the Prime Minister's, I withdraw, Mr. Speaker, related to the Green Slush Fund to the RCMP. The argument has been made that handing over these documents breaches the constitutional rights of individuals. It is time. This government recognized that the Constitution was designed to protect individuals from the government, not the government from individuals. It is time for this government to come clean with Canadians. Enough with the cover-ups, and enough with gorging themselves, their family, and their friends at the public trough. Hand over the documents. We want to get back to the work of the people in this chamber. It is not us obstructing this work. All it takes is for the Prime Minister to hand over the documents. We want accountability, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.